Okay. Oh, that's my favorite way to start.
And then if you'll talk a little bit about that piece, and then the progression to when you got diagnosed.
Okay.
All right, we'll start with that. So your name, and you want her to spell it?
Yes, please.
Okay.
My name is Deborah Fink. The last name is Finck.
Deborah, D-E-B.
Deborah.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, we always want to have it on tape so whoever's editing can byline you correctly.
Ah, yes,
So,
of course. Okay.
So can you tell me a little bit about Jonathan coming into your world?
Yes, my son Jonathan was born, conceived in an institution in Metairie or New Orleans. He was conceived there because his mother had autism, and she lived in that institution as she was 12 years old until the time in which she was 35 and was found to be pregnant, 7 months along with our son. So we were called by an adoption facilitator, and that woman told us that there would be a little boy born that nobody wanted because he was an institutional child conceived by an unknown father and by a woman who really had no idea who she, yes. So Jonathan was put up for adoption, and I flew to New Orleans in the middle of the night. And when he was 36 hours old, should I start again? Blah.
When he was, you can just.
When he was 36 hours old, I had him in my arms at the airport in New Orleans. So that began our time with Jonathan. He was a beautiful child, had perfect scores on APCAR scores, and there wasn't a thing wrong with him, and no one expected that he would be at all affected by his mother's, what they called retardation at the time, because she was undiagnosed. And so he was born in a hospital and turned over to the adoption facilitator at 36 hours old, and she brought him in her lap in the car to the airport, where I picked him up and had him in my arms. And my first act of motherhood was to demand a car seat. So I brought him home at,
Oh, just look at Dawn. Yeah, make sure.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. You're so beautiful.
Like you're telling
Okay.
your story, like you're telling.
Oh, right. So I picked Jonathan up at the airport, spent a month in New Orleans, having every doctor under the sun tell us that he was a beautiful boy, completely unaffected by any kind of difficulties that his mother might have had. We brought him home 6 months later, adopted him here in the state of Washington. He's now 24 years old. This was in 1994. He was a beautiful child, but he didn't roll over. He didn't look at us. And he seemed to have not met a single milestone. By the time he was 6 months old, I had no idea what was wrong, but I knew something was. I went to pediatrician after pediatrician, and they all told me I was a little bit over-concerned, and that boys develop slowly, and that I should just give it some time. So that didn't work so well for me, and I spent a lot of time on the phone talking to other clinics, went over to Western Washington, brought a team over here from Western Washington and the Children's Hospital diagnostic team, and they told us when Jonathan was 9 months old that he was irremediably and developmentally globally delayed, so that he would not walk, he would not talk, he would have a shortened lifespan, and we just had no idea. We were sitting in Rockwood Clinic wondering how no one else could have told us anything about our son until he was 11 months old. And we walked out of that clinic with almost what we considered at the time a death sentence for our son. Well, as it turned out, he's alive and well, a beautiful young man, a nonverbal person affected profoundly with autism. But the interim of his life, the story after he was diagnosed was a story of running around trying to find out the truth about our son. It took us until he was 6 years old to get the kind of diagnosis that made any sense to his providers, to his parents, to his school system. And when that happened, it was an ABA specialist here in town, one of very, very few, who was able to look at Jonathan and say, you know, this young man is on the spectrum. The pediatrician, hearing that diagnosis, said, yes, okay, he may have autism. We'll have to keep an eye out for this. So we kept going. Jonathan was in public school system starting at age 3. He was in special education services. His school was, his classroom was filled entirely with people with developmental disabilities. And he was in that kind of self-contained classroom until the day he graduated from Central Valley High School when he was 18 years old. And then, in between all of that, we had an awful lot of work to do trying to figure out how to provide services for a young man who had autism, who needed to learn how to communicate, who didn't have speech, and who was arguably one of the most social young men I've ever met. In fact, when he was diagnosed with autism, many of his providers said it couldn't be true because he was so friendly. And as it turns out, a lot of people thought that was just a kind of criteria for people who have autism, is that they don't like people and they can't look you in the eye and they certainly don't want to touch you or have any kind of close contact with you at all. My son is living proof that that isn't the case. So we spent a lot of time working on trying to help him speak, it was hard for me to believe that Jonathan wasn't going to talk. The providers that he had in the school system, they didn't know. Nobody really knew for sure. But as it turns out, he's 24 and he can't speak. He can say one syllable. It stands for a lot of things. Buh. It's ball, it's bye-bye, it's bath, all of his favorite things. But he can't really talk. He does use an iPad, but that's slow going for him as well.
I think a lot of people don't understand when we use the word nonverbal to describe an individual with autism, it means so much more than that they cannot speak. What has been your experience in trying to communicate Jonathan's challenges in communication with others? I'm trying to get at that.
It's difficult to try to help people understand that my son has both an inability to form language in a kind of a physical way, but he also has the communication deficit that goes along with his disorder of autism. And so typically his providers focus on one or the other, not really knowing how to address the issue. And Jonathan's life is filled with frustration as a result because he is rarely understood. It wasn't until Jonathan was 16 years old that he learned how to point, for instance. And the first thing he pointed at wasn't food or one of his parents, it was his iPad. An icon, a picture on his iPad of a raisin, his favorite snack. So I still don't understand all of the ways in which Jonathan's inability to form language and his communications deficit in relationship to autism, I still don't always understand how to tease that out myself. But it's a very, very complicated and frustrating experience for his life because he is rarely understood.
People often recommend, even now, sign language for children in those initial years when they are showing communication challenges, but What is your thoughts about that?
Well, my son, the first 3 years of Jonathan's school, most of his teachers and the speech therapists in the school system were intent on his learning sign language. Unfortunately for him, and I think for many people who have autism, sign language is a moot point. His motor skills, his fine motor skills particularly, were not helpful in that matter. But also, he had a whole lot of trouble distinguishing between approximations of signing, and it just created so much frustration for him. He learned more, primarily because he loves the way his fingers feel when he pushes his hands together. And so his entire sensory world is so important to him and how things feel. So that sign we still have. He does this for more all the time. But as far as learning sign language, it just wasn't helpful for him. He really needed some visual cues that were not available in that modality.
How do you communicate, and you'll talk to Dawn, how do you communicate with him now? And did you have an aha moment when there was a breakthrough where you finally got a couple things right that he was trying to get to you?
My son's life is his work in his daily life is to engage with people. He is consistently trying to get someone to see him, understand him, respond to him. He works very hard at it. And for many people, just the sheer proximity of Jonathan is somewhat unnerving. For me, it was always wonderful. His affection, his level of intimacy with mom and dad was always a wonderful experience. But I still don't get my son's communication system. His iPad was the best, like I said, when he was 16 years old. He did something that no one could get him to do, ever, and that is take his pointer finger out and touch a picture. He never touched me. He never touched any object that I was ever aware of until that moment. And I would say that was a moment where I realized that my son's motivation and his limited ability to make that movement that I think what is pointing, you're supposed to point when you're a year old. How old are you supposed to be? He never could. So I think that was really an important moment, not so much for me, but for everyone else, that all of the people in his school system, all of his providers, they were trying everything under the sun to help Jonathan to communicate. And until he made that gesture toward a picture, no one was ever really quite sure he was looking. So, and not just guessing. So I think that was probably my biggest moment.
Do you think that the media has done a reasonable job of portraying individuals like Jonathan and their challenges?
I think the media is in love with a certain vision that they have around autism. It's clever. It involves a human being being locked in a body who has all of this stuff inside of them that just can't get out. I've heard that a million times. My son's not locked in his body. He's deeply, deeply and profoundly affected by his disorder. He is not a savant. He doesn't have a clever skill that we just haven't discovered yet. He works really hard to get through his day without being overwhelmed by his sensory issues. And I don't think it's easy for parents of individuals like my son to sit always in the same room with people who have children who are more, more able to communicate, more able to engage, more able to operate on a, in their environments, because my child is totally unable to support his own existence without someone there all of the time for his safety, for his security, for his sensory needs, for his personal care, for understanding what kinds of communication he might be able to, to get across. It's just very difficult. Sometimes I don't feel like I'm in the same room with people whose children who have autism are able to get on a bus by themselves and come downtown. But I will say this, on the other hand, my son has some friends that he made in his School to Life program at Central Valley School District. And that's a program for a number of people across the spectrum. My son was often in community activities with people who were much higher functioning than he is. And given any time together, you can definitely see that they both have autism. It's just people like my son have very complex needs, and it's sometimes very difficult to tease them out. I still don't understand everything that goes on with him.
So you've indicated that your son's an adult now. Where does he live, and what is your biggest disappointment and biggest hope for his future? What has been your biggest disappointment, and what is your biggest hope for?
As Jonathan grew up, I started to recognize the kind of denial that I lived in daily about what his life would be like, what his future might be like. I was very, very busy trying to get through a school year, an IEP, an opportunity that is missed, trying to give him experiences in the community. And unlike many parents who probably go to bed and wonder how the heck they're going to imagine their child leaving the house when they go to college or get married or tour the world, I just didn't think about it. I wouldn't let myself think about those kinds of things. First of all, that wasn't going to happen with Jonathan, but I didn't know what to replace those kinds of experiences or imaginings or fantasies with. So it wasn't until Jonathan was older, precariously older, very close to the time when he was going to be leaving public schools, that I started to realize that my son didn't have a future that I could see or that was acceptable to me. When the school system, especially in special education, and the involvement that parents have and the work that they have to do to advocate for their children, it's very difficult. And I thought when my son graduated that I would breathe a sigh of relief because some of that pressure would be gone. But I didn't breathe a sigh of relief, because basically what happened to Jonathan was that he left a very supportive community of teachers and aides and students. And then there was us, his two aging parents, and really nobody else. The connections were school. The community was school, and this community was lost. There was nothing in front of him that I could foresee that would be supportive or loving. And I started to realize that I had spent an awful lot of time trying to help Jonathan communicate, trying to make sure that he got a chance to do this and that, and maybe that he had this kind of therapy and that kind of therapy. But what I really cared about was that somebody would love him and treat him like he deserved to be treated, and look at him as a person with potential who could really contribute to the world, because everyone who knows Jonathan really does love him. The biggest disappointment I had was in not imagining how that was going to happen, and then trying to recognize my own family's limitations. My husband and I adopted Jonathan when I was 44 and my husband was 50. And we thought we were pretty young and healthy at the time, and then Jonathan got to be 24 and my husband's almost 75 this year, and I'm approaching 70, and after a while we just couldn't do the 24/7 care, the nighttime seizures, the constant wakefulness, we couldn't be his only care providers. So we had to look around to see what kinds of residential supports would be available for Jonathan, and that turned into a fiasco in itself, because I thought I was going to walk around to all these agents and say, no, not this one, nope, not good enough, nope, not this one, maybe this one. But what happened was that Jonathan was refused care in every single one of them. They didn't want to serve Jonathan because he requires a lot of personal care. And I'm sorry, Deb. I can't. And where would you like me to do that?
Well, maybe you could say,
Before Dawn started crying,
Yeah.
I was telling you.
That's just an emotional thing.
Yeah.
And-
right.
Okay.
Believe me, I cried a lot too. So, are you back on again?
Yep.
Oh,
Let me just, I got to run, so, thank you. Thank you. Oops.
didn't look at Dawn?
I know.
It's hard. How am I supposed to talk? I'm just kidding you. We've had a lot of tears that we've shed together, so I had to be used to that anyway. So I think I was saying that when it was time for him to find a home other than our family home, where he could receive care on a 24/7 basis, we scoured all of the residential support opportunities made available to us. We had to go through a battery of interviews, one of which resulted in a report that my son was violent and had sexual predatory tendencies. I'm looking at your face and you can't believe that. Well, I have a very gentle son, but he does have hands that will go anywhere on a person. And he doesn't make sexual advances, but he does have behaviors that need to be addressed sometimes. And when he's really frustrated, sometimes he pinches and bites. And most of the time, 99% of the time, he's just a love. But these were all the kinds of reports that had to be written in order that his care providers or his potential residential support providers would understand the problem they were dealing with. And when I read the report, I thought to myself, this child must have been spawned of Satan because he reads so, it was such a terrible report. So we had to go back and really take a look at who Jonathan was and what kind of care he really needed, what kind of supports he needed, what kind of encouragements he needed, what kinds of opportunities he needed, all of those things, what kind of strengths he had, which, by the way, are vast. And so we redid all of that, and then still the challenge was too great. because in today's current environment, with costs so high and care providers so scarce, it is very difficult to find residential supports. For someone who is both needs to be socially active and out in the community, but also needs a tremendous amount of one-on-one personal care, who needs someone who can help facilitate communication with an iPad and also be able to change, clothing for someone and help them with their toileting. So those things require a one-on-one person, and no one really wanted to be that residential support provider. So we did find finally some support from the SOLA state-operated living alternatives that the state of Washington offers, and that residential support is currently, Jonathan lives in one of those homes. His life there is very different than his life was at home. He's considered a client, a participant in a program rather than a resident in a home with roommates. It's a very unusual kind of change for him because he lived for all of his life in a very affectionate and loving home environment, and but he is cared for well, and once again, for any parent who thinks advocacy is over after school is over and there are no more IEPs, that's simply not so, because you continue to have to be a very strong advocate, not just generally speaking or once in a while as you're looking at a yearly program plan, but all of the time, to make sure that your loved ones, your young adults' needs are met, and more than just their basic needs, that somehow their quality of life is being addressed on an ongoing and real way, authentic way. It's not easy because these are paid services.
Do you want to ask your questions now, or should I move on with the Ohana? Is there Ohana?
I definitely want to do the Ohana, I'm looking at the time for that, because we're gonna bring her back for we talked about
So
the
let's
adults
wait
and
on
stuff
that.
too.
Let's keep with the younger, we'll wait to talk.
Yeah,
about
we got
Ohana
to
as
Jonathan's
separate.
old
Right, that's
Old
fine.
life, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
That's good, we wanted that,
Well-
we wanted across the,
Okay.
across the lifespan and
All
stuff
right.
too, but we are definitely bringing it in when we're talking about adult issues and Ohana and all
So,
that
yeah.
stuff.
yeah, we'll stick with
I
that.
So
told her she'll
you
keep
don't
coming back.
you don't have any of those questions that she said you were having. Then you're all done with me?
No, I have a couple more.
Oh, okay,
She
gotcha.
does. Yeah.
That's fine.
She has some.
Just a couple.
I'm sorry, Dawn.
Oh, no. For what? Oh, upsetting me?
Yeah.
No, I just have the same experience and I just tend not to dwell on it because it doesn't help me get through my day, but
Right.
talking to you, I had the opportunity to do that.
So Deb, one of the things we want to know is, what would you want the community to know about autism and individuals with autism? What do you think is important for the general population community to know?
I believe that autism is viewed by most people who aren't directly connected with a human being that has autism as kind of an interesting neurological difference. And I say that because of the kinds of questions I get when people find out that I have a son with autism. They want to know funny things like, does your child have a special skill? Or, I understand people with autism really can speak, but they just don't know how. And they have a lot to say, they just don't know how. I guess I've never seen a disorder or a disability that has so many stereotypes attached to it. Although there may be those disabilities, I'm just not familiar with them. But I feel like I'm constantly disabusing people of their funny ideas about what it really means to have autism. And so constantly well, I should say this. When I was younger, and when Jonathan was younger, I used to be angry a lot when people didn't understand that my son's meltdown in the grocery store wasn't a parenting issue. It wasn't a bad behavior issue. It was something they didn't understand. I used to get very angry about those kinds of things. But now I realize that the complexities of autism are worthy of a lot of conversation, but we really do have to get through the stereotypes first. So,
It's perfect. And we'll talk about the adults and youth needs at a different time.
Sure.
But what about some of the things in the organization like Northwest Autism Center kind of helps with some of these issues? Can you just talk a little bit about some of the things, trying to get about organizations like Northwest Autism Center, what some of the things they do that help families or help communities, and how's that maybe helped you or the
Or
community?
address that conversation that
Right.
needs to happen.
families who have children with autism are instantly, upon the moment of their understanding that something is amiss, can be pre-diagnosis or post-diagnosis. They are set adrift and completely isolated. Even if they're not, that's how they feel. And I think that one of the things that Northwest Autism Center has been able to achieve is the creation of a presence in our community, and really the only presence that I know of, that says to families with children of all ages, and some individuals who are affected themselves, who contact Northwest Autism Center because they know that they need some kinds of supports, even as adults, there is a place where you can be heard, you can feel like you're a member of a community. You aren't just dealing with service providers, because Northwest Autism Center does create that sense of community for families with their resources, their information, their parent groups, their trainings, their clinical services. It all comes together in a very humane way to address the needs of families, not just problems. And that's so very often what isolates families, is just having the sense that they have a problem that no one knows what to do about, knows how to understand. And I really think that besides being a place where you can find services, approaches to helping people with autism that really have been proven to be effective, instead of you can't imagine the kinds of services that I put my son through 24 years ago or 22 years ago when he was first diagnosed. I would have done anything, and I did. Most of those things, for the most part, most of them didn't have any impact, positive impact on my son's circumstances at all. Until I learned about Northwest Autism Center, I really didn't understand what options there were out there.
I think, do you have any other things? I mean, we're bringing her back and
I
stuff,
know,
right?
I guess I feel like I have a bazillion other things.
There's
Yes.
probably another person out there,
Yep,
right?
yeah, so that's why I'm also.
Right.
Thank you.
I'm-
All right, can you just state your name and spell it for us, please?
The full name.
Well,
My name is Catherine Baydek, KATHERINE, BAYDEK.
perfect. So tell me about Rachel.
Rachel is 4, and she is just a kind, sweet girl who loves Disney princesses and singing songs.
So when did you first realize that there might be some challenges or something?
She was about 2 when we realized that something might be different. We noticed that she wasn't really talking much, and we took her into an early intervention program, and they said, well, besides the communication deficits, we're seeing a lot of sensory issues with her as well. And so that's when the pieces kind of start, falling together, like this is more than just her not being able to communicate effectively. This is a whole bigger picture.
And what did you do? How did you get the diagnosis? Who was the one that actually?
We took her to a developmental pediatrician at Providence. His name's Timothy Jordan. And he was the one who gave her the diagnosis. She had just turned 3 when that happened, and it was rough. Actually, through her entire appointment, she had a meltdown. He couldn't test her for anything because it was just that hard for her to go through that. So that was kind of reassuring to know that what we thought might have been a problem was, and that we were doing something to help her.
What about your regular pediatrician? Did they have any concerns, or did
They ran a screener. So her doctor ran a screener on her at her 3-year well-child visit and said, listen, there might be some things. She scored kind of high on this, so I'm going to refer you. And so we got in to see the developmental pediatrician within a couple months. So it was a pretty quick process for us.
And so you said a couple of months.
Yes.
Versus, so why do you think that's quick versus?
With a lot of services, we have more need than we have providers. So in the scheme of things, it is pretty quick for us, but it would have been nice to have it done within a couple weeks. I'm not going to say it would have been, easier that way, but for example, getting in here to have her programming for this, the 12-week program, I think it took us about 3 months to find something that fit with our schedule and that you guys had an opening for.
Mm-hmm. So how was your experience with the treatment here?
We loved it, and we especially loved that we got to have a chance to meet other families who had children going through similar experiences, and the parent programming was really helpful in reinforcing what she was learning here at home so that she's getting consistent feedback all the time.
What were some of the skills or things that she learned while she was here?
Rachel learned how to state her needs, have more communication with peers, which was always hard for her, and also just how to regulate some of her emotions and feelings. So that was really helpful in helping her have positive experiences with her peers.
Let's see. So how else has the Northwest Autism Center helped you? You said you had, treatment and things. Is there anything else that's?
It was nice to have a place where we could come and ask questions about her DDA, so her Medicare and her waivers, and how to find resources to utilize those services, because it is kind of hard to figure out so I have this money, what do I do with it, and where can I use it? So it was nice to be able to just have that there, to have Jill answer questions for us.
So what would you want to say to other families if they think there's a concern or have a new diagnosis? What would you say to other parents?
If you think there is something that needs to be addressed, make sure you're letting your doctors or your children's doctors know, because the worst case scenario is they say, no, there's nothing that you need to be concerned about, and that it's just one more bridge you've crossed. And then if there is, and there's further treatment needed, then you have that available, and the earlier you start, the better results you're going to see.
What do you want the community at large to know about autism, or other family members to know about that?
I feel like the community needs to know that people with autism are people first. They have a diagnosis, and neurodiversity should be embraced and accepted. And children with autism grow up to be adults with autism. So we should be focusing a lot on how to transition those children and to how to have the best adult life they can have.
You're gonna make me cry there. Trying to think of what is something is there anything else you want to share that you think, you know?
I don't know.
What are your hopes for the next kind of,
Like
for Rachel?
5-year plan? Or-
What's your 5-year plan?
For Rachel, I would just like her to feel welcome and included with her peers. I realize that she's coming up on an age where children are going to know more differences and sometimes can be a little cruel in pointing that out. So I kind of want to just build her up the best I can so that she's confident in who she is.
What are some myths about autism that you want to?
Myths. I love the autism myths. They're cold children who, you know, their mothers didn't love them and they don't have empathy. She's the most empathetic person I know. She gets so upset when she sees injustice in the world. So that's nice to know that she is feeling those feelings that everyone else does. And one of the myths that I believed when I was going through the diagnosis process was girls didn't get autism. So that wasn't the thing that was really on my radar. And then I found out how wrong I was.
Bummer. What would you know, autism's in the media.
Yes.
Quite a bit. What would you want, your thoughts about that, or what kind of things would you want the media to?
I think we should stop focusing as a general public on the why of autism and maybe focus more on what can we do to make sure that the people are more included in the community and more acceptance of people with autism and their differences.
Can I ask how your extended family, or, you know, with this?
We are lucky because we have some family members who already have some developmental differences. So we grew up in environments where we were very accepting and open to it. So when we told aunts and uncles and parents and grandparents about it, they were very accepting and said, okay, what do we need to do? What can we do to help her have the best experience? So that was very comforting.
I just had an impression that was so good. I think, anything else you want?
I don't know what you want.
I know,
I can expound on my child.
I have a feeling you're going to come back when I have some other things.
Okay.
So what, all right, here's this. So now you said that Rachel is in the ECAP program,
Uh-huh.
so she has peers. Why is it important for her to be with peers, and why do you think it's important for peers
Yes.
to be with children with autism?
I think it's even more important for typically developing children to be with other children of their own age who don't have the same thought processes and skills and abilities to teach that there is diversity in the world. And for Rachel, her benefit is she gets to see the actions that people are doing that are considered typical so that she's able to kind of mimic them because that's how she learns. So I think it's beneficial for everyone.
It is, and it's fabulous.
Yeah.
Anything else you think? I think we're good. You're like, I gotta do this. Okay, I think that was great.
Perfect.
I appreciate that. So, all right, that's somebody else. All right, I think
Cool.
we're good, but I tell you over more.
Oh, you're fine. I'm rolling, so we're good.
Oh, great. All right, first, can you just say your full name and spell it so they can have it for their thing?
Chandra Lowry, CHANDRALOWRY.
Perfect.
I just think
Yeah.
I missed on this a little bit. Showed up pointing right at you. There we go.
There we go. Oh, it's pointing at my forehead.
It's like, all right.
Now that's the hospital.
Yeah, you know, it's one of those things. All right, we're good. So go ahead and do your name and spelling again.
Okay, Chandra Lowry, CHANDRALOWRY.
Perfect. So tell me about your child.
Jaden. There's a lot to say.
So how old is Jaden? And give me some, some things about who he is.
He's 5 years old, loves to play ninja, loves to be loud, make new friends. He's great. He's funny.
So he's a really good sense of humor.
Oh, yeah. A little sarcastic. Don't know where to get that from.
So
Also, one more second. It's just getting more echo than I do. That's why we wear headphones. All right, now we're good.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Sorry, just continue.
Yeah. So, when did you think that Jaden had some challenges or some difficulties? How old and?
When he was 2, he didn't really start talking until he was almost 3. So we had sent him into guild school, and then they started picking up little things. I was in denial. I figured, oh, he's just little, he's a boy, you know. And then when he started getting older, he started acting out more and more, and we started noticing little things here and there.
What kind of things did you notice that?
He wouldn't look you in the eye. When he got mad, he couldn't tell you what was wrong. He would flap his arms, run, scream, bite, pinch.
So that must have been really difficult for you and your family.
Yeah, it was, because we never knew what was wrong. He wouldn't talk, he couldn't tell us. So we would always try and have to guess, and you never really knew.
So what kind of supports have you received since then? Or tell me about his treatment here at Northwest Autism Center.
Treatment here was amazing. This place is like a godsend. And now extending it out to the in-home care is going to be really big help.
So
He loved it here.
He loved it here?
Yeah. He would be the first one ready to get in the car.
That's great. What were some of the things that he worked on here and skills that he maybe obtained?
He worked on his speech. He worked on his attitude. He's gotten a lot out of here that he still does at home. He loves his token system. That's
so
probably
what is that token system? How do you use that?
the token system's a reward system. Every time he does something good and that we don't have to ask him to do, he gets to put a Power Ranger puzzle piece together. And once it makes the full
Great. So tell me about the token system again and kind of how it works and how it helps him and how it helps your family.
it's a reward type system. So when you say you get a token, it's really a puzzle piece. And it's a Power Ranger picture that he picked out here that they set up for him. And they let us take it home to help us there. But he has to help out and be good and do good things to be able to put the piece of the puzzle together. And when he finishes it, that's when he gets his big prize that he chose at the beginning of the day. So it helps keep him in line and balanced. So he'll stop and rethink. If he does something wrong, we can either pull that piece down or he doesn't get a new one. So he has to stop and think about it, and he does it a lot more now than he ever did before.
That is great. So how did you hear about Northwest Autism Center?
Through one of the workers came through my mom's line at Safeway. And they had talked a few times before, and she pointed us in this direction.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. So does he have a diagnosis or?
He wasn't fully diagnosed with autism. He got diagnosed with autistic tendencies.
And where did you get that diagnosis from?
Through one of the specialists. I don't remember who they were.
That's all right. So what are some of the challenges that you might have with having a child with autism tendencies or some of his challenges? What's hard?
Challenges are many. A lot of it's hard. I can only imagine what the parents go through with children that are fully autistic.
So can you give me some examples of maybe what are some of the challenges?
His learning, his speech, his behavior, self-control, and how he kind of interacts with other people.
What would you want other families or people in the community to know about autism tendencies or characteristics or behaviors? Is there anything you want to tell anyone else?
Just to keep an eye out for him. I mean, some parents might not even know. They might be like I was and be in denial and not even know that their kid needs help when they really do.
And you said that Northwest Autism and the treatment here was really good. What were some of the things that happened at Northwest Autism Center that you really got out of or Jaden got out of being here?
Honestly, everything here. Me, the classes, getting to, know more about autism and how to help him cope and how I can help cope with it. The classes here for parents are great. we still use everything out of the books at home. And Jaden, he came into this place and he was just a wreck. He didn't know how to control himself, and he left here, he's almost a different kid. It's great.
And what about other family members and?
His brother got to know more. You guys had Jeremiah coming in here towards the end of the treatment, and he got to come in here and play, and Jeremiah really got his eyes open on what's going on with his little brother. And now it has made him a lot different too. Instead of getting mad at him and yelling at him, he'll stop and think and, kind of remember that, hey, my little brother has a hard time doing this. Let me show him.
So it's helped really the entire family.
It's built their bond, yes.
And then what about other family members? Did they participate at all?
My mom. Grandma was here a lot for it too.
So it wasn't just for him, but it really was for
It was for everybody. This place Northwest Autism doesn't just focus on the kids, they focus on the family.
That's great. So when you were coming into treatment, are there other things at Northwest Autism Center or, Jill helped you kind of with the process or all that?
She walked us through everything. She showed us the ropes, showed us what we needed to do, helped us get it done. And she really pushed for Jaden to get in here, and now we see why.
So good. You can have any, I know, don't you just want to cry about it? Let's see, so we got how you helped in Northwest Autism Center. So now that he's kind of gone through this and the treatment, what are some of your thoughts about, next steps with Jaden? Like, now that he's kind of gone through treatment and.
We're starting the at-home care next. We got an email, I don't know if you sent, I can't remember who sent it, but asking, when we'd be able to be home for it. He's already excited. We kind of told him that he might be starting the at-home care, and he's all about it.
Yep, and so we will continue to try. So
He
now-
loved the girls here.
He liked all the staff.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about the other staff here and kind of those interactions and why he liked them so much.
Well, I would watch from the window, and the way they interact with the kids here it's amazing. The people here, they have so much patience, and the knowledge and understanding it's great. I don't think you can really find it anywhere else.
So, is he going to be starting school now?
He's in kindergarten.
Right.
We switched him schools, though, to a school that has more help for special kids, and he already made his friends there.
That was such a good thing. All right. Any last things you want to share, whether Northwest Autism Center or, oh, here, I have another question before we do that, is if people maybe do have a concern or anything, what would be your recommendation for another family now that you've kind of gone through this process?
Just call. Just make a call. Come in. Anyone here can help. They might not be doctors, but they can point you in the direction you need to go.
Any other things you want to share or things I missed about Jaden and your family? Or?
I don't know.
I know. Whenever, she always
It's
has-
hard.
It's always you never know. Do you have any other things since?
I think she did great.
I think we
Thanks.
had some great sound bites. Good job.
Thank you.
You did a nice job. Perfect. I know, right?
Works for me.
This is what I don't know. All right, great.
So looking at you, right?
Yep, just
Okay.
looking at me. So first, just tell me your name, your full name and spelling so they can have it for the editing.
So my name is Jason Mettler. It's Jason. Last name is Mettler.
Great. So tell me about Addison.
So Addison was born 2014, midsummer, and she was born in Missoula, Montana. She's the perfect little angel, really. As difficult as some of the autism has been, she's still also been quite easy at the same time. Addison is very, very independent, which is not quite the same as her older brother, who was also born on the very same day. They actually have the same birth date. Addison she's amazing. As difficult sometimes things are, she's absolutely amazing. She didn't show signs or anything like that until she was probably about a year old, when I kind of caught on. But we didn't want to obviously dive right into it until we had some other clues, if you will. But she's great. Like I said, she's extremely independent. If she needs something, then she'll ask. She's not your typical little, what she is now, 4 years old. She just turned 4. She's amazing.
So what were some of those concerns that you kind of mentioned or things?
So what we picked up on was the willingness to walk was one of them. And while we tried and we worked with her a lot, she was kind of struggling, but it was about a year and a half until it was like super, like I could put her down and she could move on her own. But one of the bigger things with Addison was the flailing hands. She's what they call the flapper. And she still does it to this day, and she does it a lot. Her favorite thing is a pair of socks. She likes her socks, and she flaps and flaps and flaps. And if she doesn't have anything in her hands, then it's this. And she can be in the greatest mood, and she can be in the worst mood. It doesn't matter. She's a constant flapper.
So,
And that's actually the first thing that got, yeah.
So how about, when did she get the diagnosis and how was that process?
So the official diagnosis was March of 2018. And that went through her primary care provider. And the process was probably a good 2 months. She needed to do the ABA stuff, the speech therapy, and kind of go through the process and do the motions. But right off of the bat, her doctor said, this is what we have going on. And it was through paperwork is what we had to do. We were required to fill out about a good week's long of, what did she do when she did this, and when did this happen, and if it did, how many times and when. And once that was all documented, recorded, we had another appointment. She did the diagnosis, and then we just kind of went through the motions, and then there was an official diagnosis finally. And at that point, we were being referred to, state-provided services or other services for education and stuff like that, and we started moving forward. And it wasn't until long that we found out about Northwest Autism Center, and it was a little bit of a wait, but we got in, and it was totally worth it.
So how did you hear about Northwest Autism Center?
So I heard about Northwest Autism Center actually through her pediatrician, and that's how we got the reference. She made a phone call, and I made a phone call, and then we talked to Gillian, and she gave me a call back. And that started the process, and actually they fought for her to be in a little bit sooner than they possibly could have actually started her, and got her in right away.
So how was treatment at Northwest Autism Center? What were some of the skills she gained?
So the biggest thing with the Northwest Autism Center was the communication, because that's one of the things that Addison still struggles with. But they found a program, it's called the PECS system. And the PECS system has allowed Addison to communicate with us when she can't verbally get it out. Because unfortunately, a lot of these kids, they have it up here. They know what they want to say, but it's not connecting, and it's not coming out this way. Whereas you and I can just talk and say, hey, I want a cheeseburger. Addison can open up the PEC system, get the binder open when she's frustrated and she can't get it out, and say, I want, and then take the picture out of the binder, put it on the Velcro, and say, cheeseburger. and she can communicate that way. She's been doing a lot better since Northwest Autism Center has done this with her, where she doesn't refer to the binder so much anymore. She's now saying, I want and to do, instead of just, I want. So instead of, I want, eat, it's, Daddy, I want to eat food, please. So she's getting the system down and now starting to complete more complete sentences doing it. And that's really been the biggest thing that Addison got out of the Northwest Autism Center. It's fantastic.
So you guys are still using that at home, or it transferred to home, so it wasn't?
Yes. So now we are doing the transfer part. So she's got that when she needs it, and it's not like openly available like it was to start with, because it used to just be right there on the coffee table, and that's what she would just go to right off of the bat. Now it's kind of sort of within her reach. She knows that if she gets desperate, she needs it. And it's not happening quite as much anymore. It's not happening as much as it used to. We're talking about twice a week, where she's frustrated and she's not quite, getting out what she wants to say. And the other part, with the transition part of it, is that I have a key ring with certain cards on it that I carry on me. So if we're out in public or in the truck or whatever we're doing, I can get the cards out and show it to her. And I pull out the card. It says, I want. She'll point at it and she'll say, Daddy, I want. And then she's got it.
So one of the concerns that people have with using pictures and doing that exchange with that is that some people think that would limit the verbal, and they just rely on that. But you have found that with Addison, it transfers to more verbal.
Yes, it does. And I think that's also based on how you are treating it with your child. I think in a lot of cases, if you're just leaving it out in the open and that's the only system that you're using and you're not enforcing getting it kind of away, then that's what the problem is. You really gotta, it's hard to do. You gotta try to push away. It's easy to not do it because it's so easy to have them doing it with the pictures. But you got to kind of force yourself to do it, and it works.
So that strategy, as well as the other picture strategies, did that come from the family training and education during your?
Yes. So when we were at the Northwest Autism Center, we also had one-on-ones with the instructors, and we had our own training, which we did once a week as well. And I think, we'll hold off on that. Say that again. I want to get that down a little bit better.
All right, that's fine. So the strategies you use, and talk to me about the family training and those kind of portions and how that helped you and Addison and.
In the family trainings, as you're talking about the once a week meeting that we did,
right,
like on
the group
Wednesdays.
meetings, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so at the Northwest Autism Center, when we did the family trainings once a week, what helped a lot with that was we could hear a lot about what the other parents were going through. There were similarities and how some things were actually quite different. So with some of these techniques that were used with Addison were also used with some of the other kids as well, in which some of the methods didn't work the same way. With Addison and her autism, we've learned that it's kind of like type 1 diabetes. There is no such thing as the same type. They are completely all different. There is no such thing that says you got to do this, 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 and this with a child who is autistic. For a lot, that's hard to understand. Some people just say, "Oh, you're autistic." Well, that's that. It's not that simple. It's not cut and dry.
So, you're doing awesome, by the way. My gosh, it's great.
Let me real quick.
Yep.
I'm gonna spit this cough
Yeah,
drop
go
out
for it.
because I feel like I'm gonna.
Yep,
it's gonna
gotcha.
make me
You
spit.
got it?
I don't want to do that on camera.
We'll cut that one out.
I should have turned this off.
That's okay. The vibrating.
No, this is that.
I don't think you could hear it.
This is that stupid. Hi, we'd like to talk to you about
Oh.
lowering your credit card interest.
Yeah, they've got like a number randomizer now.
Yes,
That's really annoying.
they're all 701s now. I know.
Oh my gosh,
Well,
I don't know what I
I
don't.
get my local numbers. It looks like a number that would be like my mom's phone number.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, looks like a local number, and it'll say Walla Walla or Wenatchee, whatever, but they're all 509.
Oh, that's horrible.
It is.
Well, that's why I don't answer unless I know who it is.
What would you say to other families, if they have concerns or they just had a diagnosis? What are some things that you've kind of learned through your journey that you would like others to know?
So I would say, if others are concerned and they have any kind of inquiry in regards to the autism itself, or if they've been recently diagnosed, to address matters right away and kind of get the ball rolling. Don't wait on it. My wife and I were actually guilty for a couple of months of saying, well, maybe she's just going to come around in a little bit. This was already after we kind of suspected, but we had kind of a hold off frame where we were like, well, some catch on a little bit later. Don't do that. Or try not to do that. The earlier the better. Because if we would have waited, a good example again is, her using the PEC system. If we would have waited, we would just be this much more behind. So the sooner that you can address any concerns, the better. Just do it. Do the evaluations. See the pediatrician, get the process rolling. And if it's not a concern, it's not a concern. You're good.
Very good advice. So what are some of the challenges that maybe families or that you guys have experienced with having a child who has autism?
So some of the challenges that we've faced with the autism, with Addison, is that, like with family, such as my grandparents, and this started a couple years ago, so it's ongoing, but asking her questions. Hey, how old are you? And how tall are you? How are you doing? What's your name? Trying to have full conversations with her, and she's blank. She understands what you're saying, but again, there's that connection, and it's not coming out. So it's hard to, especially with the grandparents, it's hard to explain to them exactly like how we should be communicating, how they should be doing it. That's definitely been a challenge. And also one of them is being out in public, and so being with the cashier at the grocery store. The cashier wants to know if she wants a sticker. She just wants to stare at the cashier. But once she gets this sticker, I can look at her and I can say thank you. She'll say thank you. But how old is she? And you say she's 4 years old, and then she's communicating as if she's 2 years old, and people don't understand. So that's definitely a challenge. Is again, it goes back to that communication part. My parents have been absolutely fantastic. They've been there since day one, and they've got it. So that's been kind of a relief. But yeah, the communication thing outside of my immediate family, with other family, and then being in public is pretty tough.
So what would you want that cashier or general public to know about autism?
I would want them to know that autism doesn't have a face. You can't see it. It doesn't just come out. And it's hard to say things like, hey, by the way, my child is autistic, so you can't talk to her this way. You have to find a polite way to explain that if it's getting intense. In a lot of cases, like with the cashier, it's super quick. You don't have to worry about it, whatever. But like with Addison, there's just the general public. There's people in line that come behind and say, oh, her blonde hair, she's so cute. What's your name? How old are you? And then it gets a little more involved, and you have to say, hey, look, my child's level 2 autistic. She might not communicate with you directly. So, either please be patient. You find a polite way to say, hey, this is why this is happening.
So you said level 2 autism.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
So with level 2 rating system, level 1, level 2, level 3 is kind of, they said 2.5, but there's technically not a 2.5. Is sort of a level of intensity with autism. Again, none of them are exactly the same. There's not just autism. So with Addison, there's X amount of struggles, how intense it is, where the communication is, and behavior. Sometimes temperamental issues are either extreme or they're a little bit lighter. Addison doesn't have the middle point. Addison is very super happy, or then there's the meltdown part, and there's not an in-between. And these are some of the key factors that have brought her into what they would call the level 2.
Perfect. So, let me see here, go through. Tell me about some of the staff at Northwest Autism Center and how they interacted with you and your family and Addison.
So the staff at the Northwest Autism Center was amazing. They have a one-on-one system. It's one of the instructors are with Addison specifically throughout the course. Day to day, they do change who it is that's with her, which is fantastic because then there's variety and it's teaching her more of the social part. They are literally one-on-one and they are hands-on. And it's really helped with Addison because she can get that social part. And it broke that kind of barrier of, I'm not going to be with Dad, because she's been with me since day one. And anything without Dad is completely abnormal. And she, after about 3 or 4 days, she was at a point where I could say, now we're going to school. That's what we called it. We said, we're going to school. And she couldn't wait. And I was able to say, have a good day. I love you. I'm going to see you a little bit later. And the staff took over from there. And it wasn't even a problem. She didn't melt down, nothing. She thought it was great. She would hold their hand and walk off to the classroom. It's literally one-on-one, and I think that's probably one of the best parts.
So, that being said, and her going through it, that must have been pretty powerful, and for her to be able to go and be without you.
And be without mom or dad, yeah.
It's a big step and things that can really change.
Yes, and one of the things too was that we could still see her, because when you're at the Northwest Autism Center, you can go down the hall, you get into another classroom, and then they have a camera set up on the computer. So you can bring your lunch, you can bring your drinks, you can sit there, look at the computer, and you can see exactly what they're doing for the whole entire course and watch everything.
That must be helpful for reassurance of, somebody caring for your child and doing treatment, as well as understanding what the treatment was like.
Yes, absolutely. And believe me, I was on that camera for the first few days, really intense. But the one thing that really helped me too with that program is it helped me. I probably didn't spend any more than a few seconds away from her until we started at Northwest Autism Center. So I had to learn how to do something on my own time, because I was literally with Addison all the time. I had to learn how to be okay with her being somewhere else, doing something else, like somebody would have their kids going to school. And so I was able to have my own kind of therapy, because I learned to actually feel okay dropping her off, and then I would go back home, and then I would come back and get her. After those first few days, because I felt like I trusted the instructors and the people that she was with, and I felt safe, and so I learned my own system.
So the treatment here is just not for the child, but for the whole family or others?
Yeah, absolutely. So the treatment is definitely very good for the parents and guardians, because you can get that sort of self-therapy where it's okay. Your kid is it's okay. You can let go a little bit. It really is okay. You don't have to watch over them. You don't have to hover them. And you can learn that you are okay to have your own time. And so, yeah, again, it's not just your child. You definitely can benefit from the program yourself as a parent and guardians.
And I know it's always hard to leave a child, for some of the first times, but can you talk about how difficult it is to have that trust or to leave a child, particularly when they have communication challenges and can't tell you maybe what had happened previously?
So, say the first part again.
So, that even though it's difficult to leave any child for the first time.
For the first time,
Yeah,
okay.
for the first time.
So yes, definitely leaving your little one behind for the first time in the first few days, super tough. Definitely rough, and there's paranoia. Once you figure out the system and you've met the instructors, the staff, makes it a lot easier. But you definitely in the beginning are always going to have those moments where you're wondering, and you're wondering because you've got the communication barrier that they have. Are they communicating? I know that myself for the first couple of days, I knew what she needed when I saw her on the camera. I could have run to the classroom and I could have fixed any said situation because I knew. But I had to drop my guard. And those are probably the hardest moments right there, right off the beginning. Every single parent who comes in is probably going to have that sort of experience. But it is okay. And it only takes a couple of days to really realize that. And I would say that is probably ultimately the biggest challenge in the beginning is as you said, it's the communication part.
So the staff, and particularly because Northwest Autism Center, we believe that families should be able to see anytime, very transparent by learning from that. So having that camera system and the staff made you feel more comfortable?
Absolutely. Having the camera system that's inside of that classroom where I can be still separated, and she doesn't know that, is fantastic. It's an extremely high sense of security. I don't have to really worry about if something's wrong, if she's alone or anything. I can see right there at that moment, at any time. What is she doing? Where are they going? If she goes to a different classroom, the cameras are following. I see her the whole entire time.
That is great. Let me see what other I have for this. What about, we already did the words of wisdom and stuff. Church and public. I think we're pretty, so you said you did early retirement to take care of Madison?
I did. I am basically, officially, for the most part, essentially, I am retired. More so that, with having to have her cared for, ultimately is actually more expensive than it is for me to work. My wife is in a great career. It allows me to be able to stay home with her, take care of her, and get her to her classes, and any kind of ABA therapy, speech therapy, anything she's got to do when we go to see the pediatrician. So her and I are definitely a team. We're one-on-one. But yes, that's basically what we agreed on and what works best for us.
How is she with her older brother? Does she have a brother, or?
We won't record this part.
No.
She hasn't met her older brother. Older brother lives with mom in Seattle,
Gotcha.
and it's a whole different.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Actually, my oldest son, mom's over there too, so we're all good.
So make sure, yeah.
I have my hand over it, so we know where it's at, but
Right.
we'll know. You guys will know on the videos.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. So
I don't-
Yeah, you'll see it. Yeah.
I don't see any relevance anyway.
Now, any last thoughts or things you want the world, community, people at large to know?
I want to, one thing I would really like to say, people ask a lot, what would you say? Because it's difficult. The world should know, overall, everybody, that, again, autism does not have a face. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you don't know when the child at the grocery store who's screaming or having a meltdown, why that is. And it could be because there's another reason. They're not just there to be annoying or making you mad. You probably wouldn't know that Steve Jobs and Dan Aykroyd are autistic. You can't see that on camera through the movies, or that Steve Jobs is an absolute genius. And people should also know too that, yeah, there's struggles with autism, but these kids are really smart. They are geniuses, and you just have to find what it is that they are the genius at. There is something in there, and as they get older, you're going to find what it is, whether it's art, music, developing Microsoft. They're out there, and again, you have to remind yourself that you can't see it.
What's your biggest hope for Addison?
My biggest hope is for Addison to be independent. I want her to be able to be confident in being on her own and not relying on a certain kind of system where she may need to rely on that to survive. I want her to be independent and to be able to communicate and make her tell us, do what she wants, and then do what she needs to achieve those goals.
Thank you. You were fabulous. Wonderful.
No worries. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Then why don't you do your say and spell your name, your first and last name.
Andrea May Pratt, ANDREAMAY PRATT.
Great. And so they'll just have it for their thing. So first, tell me about your little one.
He is unique. He is my hero. He is the best thing that has ever happened to me. And I don't want a typical child anymore. I want this. I want this life. I want to learn and grow with him, because seeing the world through his eyes has completely changed me. So he is amazing.
What do you think is one of the most special things about him?
Jeremiah has empathy, which a lot of children with autism lack. He is super caring. If someone gets hurt, he's right there. He'll be the first one to console them. It doesn't matter if they're on the soccer field or in school or, somebody at the grocery store. He'll be like, "You okay?" And he will show concern. And that is the one piece of the puzzle that I'm glad that we do have. He has that empathy, and that it's a rare quality to have, and I don't want anybody to take that away from him.
So when did you start having concerns, and kind of what were they?
He was, I believe it was a 6-month checkup. When he was born, Dad and I could not agree on a name. We had the whiteboard in the hospital, and we're writing all these, names down, and I'm like, oh, I don't like that. Dad wanted a junior, and I'm like, no, because this day and age, it's hard to be a junior because, Social Security and, all those kinds of things. So we finally decided, Dad's name is Jeremy. We decided on Jeremiah. His great-grandmother over in Ohio loved the name Jeremiah. So I'm like, it's not a junior, so we'll go with it. So I decided I wanted my own little name for him, which was JJ. And everybody else called him JJ or Jeremiah, and he never responded to it. And I remember him laying on our bed, even from birth. There was a tree outside our window, and he would just stare at the leaves and watch them. And this is my only child. So I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that they did that kind of stuff. But he would do it for hours. He would just stare and look, and he'd be so entertained by these leaves wrestling on the trees. And you go in for your checkups, and they give you this little form that you have to fill out, this little questionnaire. And does he respond to his name? No, he doesn't. You can call it from anywhere. You can be in front of him. He does not respond to his name. So we brought it up to his pediatrician, and she goes, well, Jeremiah is kind of a long name, so have you ever thought about shortening it? So I started calling him Maya, and that was, hey, everybody needs to call him Maya. He needs to respond to his name, and he never, even to this day, it's a 50-50 shot if he will. So there was that, and then he never took interest in coloring or age-appropriate like activities or learning levels. He was either way above it or had no interest in it. So it was a long process, but I would say about 6 months is when I first noticed that there might be something off about him.
So when and how, can you talk to me about the diagnosing process? Like, when did he get diagnosed?
That was a long process. He was formally diagnosed March of 2017. His pediatrician gave us a referral to Sacred Heart Child Neurology with her favorite doctor who only works in Spokane 2 days a month. So it was a long waiting period, a long process. It took almost a year to get diagnosed.
That is a long time, very hard.
It is, because what do? You're in that, level of uncertainty. It's like, oh, well, is he really? Is he not? But I took additional steps. I contacted Spokane Regional Health District, and I did a questionnaire that they had, and they emailed me and kind of communicated with me, and they're like, we're going to set you up with your school district. So they set me up with the school district, and they talked to me about early intervention, but Jeremiah was only 2 at the time, 2.5. So they're like, well, we can't really do anything until 3. So we put him in early intervention at 3.
So what are some of the, particularly during those times, but what are some of the challenges that you guys face or during that time as well?
Waiting lists. Waiting lists is probably our biggest challenge. Gosh, they're awful. The waiting lists, the level of uncertainty, and not having, I'd spent hours Googling. I'd spent many nights trying to find answers that I literally can't talk to anybody about because I don't know anybody else who has a child with autism, and I don't know what I'm supposed to look for, and the internet can be a cruel place and it can be a good place. So I just took the steps that I thought I needed to take, and it was hard.
So how did you find Northwest Autism Center?
We were referred here by the child neurologist for ABA therapy.
So tell me about that experience and about the treatment that he received here.
The 12-week program we went through with Northwest Autism was life-changing. Dad and I could not agree on whether or not we actually wanted to do it because there's so many things on the internet that give you negative thoughts and impact on what ABA is. We could not agree. And I finally put my foot down with him, and I was like, if we don't like it, we'll just stop. I was like, so that process to kind of like, that decision to go through with it, that was a hard decision to make because you don't want the internet will tell you that it will turn your child into a robot. And there's so many unique things about Jeremiah that we did not want to change. We were very adamant, we want him to still be him, but we want things to maybe get easier. So we did our eval here, we had our explanation of how everything goes, and one of the first things that we were told is, don't listen to the internet. The internet will tell you awful things. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, what do you do here? So we were given some examples and we're like, okay, well, we left here feeling a lot better about, okay, maybe this will work. And we still had the agreement that if it doesn't work, we stop. And we finished out all 48 days.
Did you find that it helped?
So much. It helped us so much. Maya can transition from preferred activity to non-preferred activity better. There were certain elements that were introduced to him that we had never thought about before, like the timers. We were able to download the same timer that was used in clinic onto his home iPad, and now he's using it in school. And he knows how to use it, he knows how to navigate it, he knows that it means business. So those are one thing that has been really awesome. He is so much more social and including of other kids. He wants them to want to be involved. If he sees someone playing on the playground by himself, he'll go up to them and want to play. So it's that. He did a lot of side-by-side play before ABA, and now he does inclusion play. It's something I never thought that we would see.
So talking about that, he got treatment here to 12 weeks, but his growth has continued after that, and it's been in other areas?
Yes, he has grown consistently. The parent training has probably been the biggest takeaway that his dad and I have had, because we were able to understand and learn how to handle certain situations, how maybe to better accommodate him and to use them in both households. I don't know if we would have the same result if we didn't have the parent training. And it was nice to be able to sit behind that glass and kind of watch what everyone was doing with him and how they were doing it, because at first we weren't understanding how this is changing things. So we were able to have little takeaways from what was happening and be able to incorporate them into our homes.
And so with the family training, even though you're not in a single home, you both have two separate homes, but you were both be able to participate. Tell me about how that's like working together and doing that.
I'm glad you guys can edit.
You don't have to. It's okay.
It's okay. I just don't know how to.
But you were both being able to participate too, right? For the
We're-
family training.
Yes, we both were stubborn. We both want to be the alpha parent. So things like this always start as a competition with us until we get comfortable, because there's a lot of, we both want to be alphas, but then we both want to know like what's going on, because Dad doesn't really know how to communicate and I over communicate. So there's no happy medium. So unless we're both there, it's kind of like, what do we do? So he would show up for the parent training every Thursday. I would show up every Thursday. We both took a ton of time off from work, but we both made sure that we were here, and we would brainstorm during classes and kind of, laugh and joke with each other, because we'd be watching videos and I was like, oh, that's Maya. We were able to work together on identifying, pieces of his puzzle for the behavior plan, what we both wanted to work on, and we were definitely in tune with those things and areas, and we were able to come up with a plan of action.
So you said that because of the requirement of family training, you both had to take a lot of time off of work. Was it worth it?
Absolutely. I would take time off of work over and over again. I would do it every day if I had to, it could help me better understand how to handle Jeremiah and how to help him succeed in life. I would do it.
And the parent trainings helped you?
Oh, so much. The parent training is, I can't express how thankful I am for it because it was very diverse in our classes. We had people leaving, coming in, new families. We're able to stay after and kind of talk about, well, you know, my child's in this therapy clinic and I don't like it. Oh, go to this therapy clinic. It was a safe environment where we were able to freely talk about our children and not be judged. Oh, it was, you felt like you were part of something because most people don't understand. They don't get it. They're very opinionated and it is very hard. So it was like the safe zone. There are many times where I could have left parent training and went back to work, but I'm like, no, I'm staying because it's nice to be able to talk to other parents, other moms, other families, and kind of see what challenges they face and what they recognize, and they're asking for advice and opinions, and it's so helpful to everyone in that room during those discussions because it's, oh, well, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you called this place? Did you get on this waiting list? Oh, no, I've never heard of that. Let me write that down. That was great.
So some of the parents have mentioned that even though it's treatment for the child, that treatment was really for the whole family.
I would absolutely agree that it is treatment for the whole family. If you're able to take the time and, you know, sit and watch how the BCBAs and BTs interact with your child and how they handle and respond to situations, how your child responds to those situations, it is life-changing. Those are things that you can incorporate into your home, and these children spend 12 weeks, 48 days dealing with the same thing day in and day out. Well, how do you expect to continue that if you don't go home and do those same things? But how are you to know how to do those things unless there is parent training, unless there is that opportunity to observe and ask questions, and you're not afraid to ask those questions because this is a safe place. You're not being judged, it is so safe. It's like home. It's like second home. I miss it. I miss it so much.
Well, once with Northwest Autism Center, now because you have Jill and always
Yes.
to be able to call and for
Yes.
those things. So
Yes.
what would you want other families to know as you were talking about, they see it on the internet or a therapist says ABA is stuff. What would you as a parent? Well, I'm glad you came. And
Doing his things, and we had some garden fresh green beans, and I'm sitting out on the cement outside my shop just making smiley faces with him, and and my coworker's like, he doesn't do that with people. I'm like, well, they just know. They just know.
So, and with that story, you were talking about how being involved in here and going through treatment, it's empowered you and you've helped other people.
Yeah, I have helped recognize characteristics of autism in other kids. I am open and honest about it, and I will give you my best advice. I will ask probing questions, and I'll be like, hey, have you ever thought about,
So if you could say one thing to families about that or concerns, what would it be?
Don't ever be afraid to ask. Don't be scared. It's not as bad as you think it is.
And so, what would you want others to know about ABA? You were scared to kind of come and do that.
Don't Google it. It's like WebMD. It'll tell you that it's the worst thing in the world and that you're dying. ABA is, I don't know where we would be without ABA. Our biggest fear was that our son was starting kindergarten. And he started kindergarten, and I don't think we would be in the same mental state as we are now if we didn't go through with ABA, if we didn't watch him interact with those kids, if we didn't learn those tips and tricks and tools that we were able to even pass on to the teacher and to, school personnel. Hey, we know about this problem. We know about that problem. We know how to handle this. If and the tools we were given, our biggest concern, and we brought it up when we were evaluated, he's going to start kindergarten. We cannot stop it. But it's a matter of, do we go with half days? Do we go inclusion? Do we go seclusion? What do we do? Right? It was a very anxious time for Dad and I, and it was scary. It was scarier than the diagnosis. And they were able to not only help us prepare Jeremiah for kindergarten, but they also prepared us. They gave us, hey, he works really well off of visual schedules. And then I was given printed and laminated visual schedules that I was able to hand to the teacher. Social stories were printed and laminated and put into a nice file, and I was able to hand those off to the teacher. And that made that teacher so excited. She was ready for this. She goes, wow, you guys are really prepared. You really know our child. Yeah, we do. It was great. This is what to expect. This is, how he does things, because he's very stubborn.
So,
I have a thought.
yeah.
Are we assuming everybody knows what ABA is, or should we explain that?
We will explain that. I'll explain
Yeah,
that
okay.
for those things, because one of the whole
I'm
things
just
will be
thinking
ABA.
about it.
I know, right.
Yeah, okay, no problem.
And we're gonna do a whole thing on what the treatment is
Okay.
and stuff too.
Okay.
And I'll give them a visual of ABA and stuff too, so that'll be good.
No worries.
But yes, good.
It's applied behavior analysis.
Yeah, so what is ABA? What does it mean to you? So what is it and what does it
It's a
mean?
life-changing acronym.
So what is ABA to you? Or what does ABA stand for? And what is
Or how would you explain to a person like me who doesn't know what it is?
Okay. That's a little bit,
That's a big one.
that's kind of, and everybody's perception, I would imagine, is different. So
Oh, no worries.
I don't have a degree. So
That's
I don't
all right,
really-
but you're a mama that
I
knows
could
and
probably
everything.
say the wrong things.
Diane told me to watch out for terminology.
I bet she did, because
Yeah.
they inundated her with the professionals ones and stuff too.
Yeah.
Tell me about just last question probably is, tell me a little bit about the staff at West Autism Center.
They're awesome. The staff at Northwest Autism Center, they're very welcoming. They're so non-judgmental. They are able to answer any and all questions. It's really easy to ask them anything from, how was the day? How was, potty breaks? Did he eat? What did he learn today? And they were very excited to give you that information at the end of the day. It was really helpful, or what new thing he had learned, or maybe he did something different that he's never done before. And those little tiny things, those are huge things in the life of autism. He played with somebody today. He started singing along in circle time. He started heading circle time. He wanted to be the center of attention, because before ABA, before coming to Northwest Autism, that was not our child. And during ABA, it took a little bit for him to get comfortable and used to it. And I love that they have that set expectation, day one, we're not going to dive right into trying to fix everything or, redirect. We're going to make sure that he's comfortable at first and kind of get him used to, hey, this is, we do circle time, we sing songs, we read books, we interact, we go to speech, we have to paint, we do activities, and this is how we're going to handle all these things. So it was really interesting. The first 3 weeks we were here, Dad and I are in the observation room the entire time. And then finally one day we're like, they have this. We can leave. That's the first time we've ever left our child in the hands of professionals. And that we can't leave him in a doctor's office. We can't leave him in a school. Even we sit in on speech and occupational therapy. Not that we can't leave them with those therapists, but we want to know, we want to learn, but we're like, they have this. We can go. It was a relieving feeling, and it was a very scary feeling all at the same time, but they got this. They can handle the meltdowns. They can handle the milestones. They're there. It's just great. It's nice.
Okay, good. That's good. No, that's good. But observation window and doing that help you feel more comfortable?
Yes. The observation window, it's something to get used to, but it definitely helped ease all that anxiety and tension. And the BTs and BCBAs, they know you're back there and they're still doing their job. They're still continuing as if you're not there. It's great because there was a couple times where I'd leave work, I'd drop him off, leave, come in, just kind of peek in, maybe come a little bit early or, just want to see how something was going because maybe Jeremiah's behavior had changed and I wanted to see if I could catch it. They would be the same whether I'm back there or not. It would be the same expectation every single time. And the thing that made us comfortable enough to leave was that piece of if they did hit a milestone. Our son thrives off of like cheers and claps and just that, what is the word? Positive reinforcement. He thrives off of positive reinforcement. So if he did something new, how you react to that new behavior will determine whether or not he's going to continue that same behavior. So if he met the smallest of milestones, the BCBAs and the BTs are just clapping and applauding and they're doing everything that I would do myself. So it's like, they got this. I can leave. Not that it was exciting to leave, but it was nice. I miss it so much. I wish this was longer than 12 weeks.
Me too. So any last thoughts, things you want to share, words of wisdom or anything?
Jill really wants me to do the co-parenting thing.
Yes. And so how is it with the co-parenting and going through the process?
Our child was 2.5 when we started co-parenting. And it was, at that time, the hardest thing I had ever had to do in my entire life. I thought it was the end of the world. He's now almost 6, and we've been co-parenting all of this time, and it is definitely a personal decision that you have to make. You have to decide what you're going to do from that moment on. You can hold hate and bitterness and just tear down everything that other person is doing, or you can encourage it, or you could pull them aside and be like, hey, it works better if we do it this way. Can you just try it out with me? It takes time, but we're a blended family. We don't have step parents in our family. We have bonus parents. He's got a wonderful stepmom, he's got a wonderful stepdad, and he has great relationships with both of them, and he no longer is uncomfortable when Dad and I are around each other. I've really paid attention to my behavior, and I started watching how it affected him, and it wasn't a great thing. It was tense. It was, he's watching me roll my eyes. He's watching me just be anxious and nervous and just bitey. And I snapped out of it one day, and I'm like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I made a phone call to Dad, and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I was like, Maya was in soccer at the time, and I was like, we're not going to sit on opposite ends of the field. Whoever gets there first, you need to come sit by us because our son is distracted on that field, and this isn't right. We decided to make this child together. We had him. We need to continue that type of relationship. We just need to co-parent. We just need to be there for him because nothing else in this world matters, especially with a child with autism. They don't care about anything else. Their parents are their biggest pieces in their life. They are their biggest advocates. They are their safety. They are their security. Nobody else matters. So if mom and dad aren't getting along, how do you think that's going to affect that child? Because I can tell you it's not positively. It is very negative, and it reflects in their daily behavior, how they react to things and how they perceive things. So the more you coexist and the more you get along and you make decisions based on what is not only best for your family, because if this was, if I had a typical child, I would still be that bitter girl that, nope, I'm not going to deal with it. You're just, you can sit at the opposite side of the soccer field. I don't care. I was like, but I have a non-typical child, and I watch how he gets distracted and how he gets uneasy, and I don't want to put him through that. And ever since we started co-parenting together, and not just him and I, but also incorporating the bonus mom and the bonus dad, and kind of giving, that their opinion matters, and how what they're noticing with that child matters, and started listening and hearing everything out, it has completely changed her son. Like ABA, co-parenting and ABA kind of go hand in hand. It has been awesome. He has changed in so many ways.
That is so wonderful. I've never heard bonus, mama step 2.
Oh, we do not.
And then bonus step 2, because we don't use those terms either, so I'm like, the bonus is it. I like that.
Step parenting is negative.
Yeah.
It kind of has a negative rapport, kind of like ABA. Step parenting and ABA have a negative rapport with, especially Google, and everybody else doesn't like the terms blended family or bonus parents. I don't want my son to think of step parenting as like a bonus, because you're going to have those kids that you run into, well, I have a stepdad, or I have a stepmom. I don't want my son to know what those are. He doesn't remember Dad and I together. He was too young when we went our separate ways, but he remembers, Dad with bonus mom, and he remembers mom with bonus dad. So, and we're all, they're still together, and, bonus dad and I are still together, and it's all he knows. That's all he can remember, and I'm thankful for that, but now we can all blend. Now we...
Aww. Well,
It's
good.
nice, yeah.
I think. All right, we're keeping you behind. Perfect. You were wonderful.
Do you want me to set the paper down?
Oh, I have to take it. Just let me know if you need it.
There you go.
I'm too short for these things. I don't like it.
We're good to go.
All right. So first, can you just say your full name and spell it?
Absolutely. My name is Sarah Donaldson, and it's spelled S-A-R-A-H. Last name D-O-N-A-L-D-S-O-N.
Great. So tell me about your little one.
My son, Tennyson, is the most amazing ball of energy. He runs at 150 miles an hour until he crashes and passes out, and maybe that's for 26 hours, and maybe that's for 4 hours. You never know for sure. But he is beautiful and complex and a perfect paradigm of absolutely everything it takes to become a parent. So every single thing you think you can be challenged on that you're like, no, I've got this, he throws it out the window for you. So it's fun. It's very fun. Definitely a perfect complement to all the ways that I needed to grow as a person. So that's really fun for me. But yeah.
So tell me about when you first started having concerns and
I first started having concerns about my son when he was about 2 years old. He had always been very engaging, very social, even from the moment he was born. And he was born 2 months premature. He would track people in the room and watch where they were going, which was unheard of at his age. When he was super tiny, he like within an hour of being born, pulled off all the lead wires off of his body and all the monitors, because he just knew that, hey, those aren't supposed to be there. I'm taking them off. But around the age of 2, he started to get really quiet, and he would scream for hours and hours on end, just 4+ hours of just screaming bloody murder, and nothing would calm him. Not food, not cuddles, not soft music, not wrapping him in a blanket. He would just scream, and there was nothing I could do. And I felt so helpless that I knew that I had to reach out for more help, because this wasn't my kid. Like, he was starting to shut down in ways that I didn't understand, and I just couldn't reach out to him and connect with him in ways that were really important. So I started asking questions until I got answers, and have just kept asking, because the hard thing about having a child that struggles is you don't know why, and you're doing the best that you can to figure out why there's that struggle, where in other areas, and like you see other kids that they don't have that. There's not that issue there. Like, they just get in the car, they just eat a sandwich. Like, it's not a big deal. So that's when I started to notice, was 2 especially.
So tell me about getting the diagnosis or that process. Was it long? Who did you need to go do?
It's been an incredibly long process. A lot of it is being persistent. Tennyson officially doesn't have a diagnosis, but we have an appointment date to get one. It has been over 2 years in coming, and that's actually considered a very short amount of time. There are people that wait greater than 7 years to get their child diagnosed. So we feel very blessed that we finally have that date fixed. October 5th is his date to see a psychologist and really be assessed for autism. Currently, he has a diagnosis of developmentally delayed with some sensory processing quirks or issues, because sensory processing is not considered by medical journals to be a diagnosis at this point in time. So we're very fortunate that he gets some occupational therapy, ABA therapy, we do speech therapy, and feeding therapy. So we do about 25 hours of therapy a week to make him be able to function in the world, which he does. He functions right now, so that's an answer to prayer by itself.
And to get those services, what challenges have you been to get those services? And you can maybe talk about why you had to move and all.
To get services for Tennyson has been the most frustrating and challenging thing that I have ever had to deal with. I myself have had medical challenges, and it's nothing. Like, you go to the doctor and you say, hey, this is how I don't feel good, or this is what's going wrong for me, and they prescribe a treatment, and you get started right away, and there you go. When you reach out to a medical professional for a kid who's struggling with something, you get put on a waiting list, and you wait for months and months and months, and yet you see your child getting worse and more challenges occurring and not knowing what to do or how to help them. And then you are stuck with a situation where maybe when you do finally get accepted into whatever program, you don't know if who's helping your child is actually understanding what's going on and if they have the expertise in order to deal with their specific situation. I think it is criminally wrong that you have to wait till your child is failing proficiently in several areas before you even qualify to see someone to attempt to assess what needs they have. We know that early intervention works, especially with kids that struggle with autism, and the fact that kids, especially in rural areas, don't get these services and they're just ignored until they are so far below their age level of standards that it just breaks my heart. There's no reason for that. We have the resources, we have the education, we know what it is that they need, and some basic, simple modifications for some of the things that they have to deal with open up their world and make their lives so much richer and change not only their quality of life, but the quality of life for their whole entire family. And yet it's being ignored. And there's no reason for it to be ignored. You can't. They're people. And the fact that we're saying that, oh, because you look a certain way and you look like you're fine, you don't matter, drives me crazy. It just drives me crazy. And it would break any mom's heart to know that, oh, your kid looks different. Okay, then we're going to help them. But if your kid looks normal, they're not worthy of our help yet until they're failing.
And so you had to move from a rural area?
I did. I had to move from a very rural area because I was commuting over 90 minutes a day to try to get my son the services that he needs. They're only available during working hours, which I understand, but especially as a single parent, how do you make that happen? Like, how do you find a job that you can be available all day long and then provide the treatment and services that your child needs and then figure out a way to support yourself? So because of where I lived, there just weren't any employment opportunities that would work around that, or fully understood that if I had to be gone from work, it wasn't because I wanted to be gone and not doing my job. It was because there was no one else to take care of my son and no one else to fulfill my role and nobody else to speak for him when he didn't have a voice. So I moved to the Spokane area, and that has been a huge blessing. because I was able to find services that really speak to his needs and have been able to help him, and essentially saved our lives, because my son wasn't going to eat anymore. He had made it up in his mind that he was going to live on water and that was about it. And because I made the decision to move, we have worked with feeding therapists and speech therapists and ABA therapies to get him to the point now where he doesn't eat a lot, and he still wants to live on just water, but he has a broader variety of food and things that he will eat, and so he's healthier, and it helps with the behaviors that he was struggling with. When you are literally starving yourself because food doesn't taste the same to you as it does to other people, and you can completely ignore the fact that you're hungry, you struggle with concentration, you struggle with sleep, you struggle with being able to interact with people around you because you're starving to death. And having the willpower to starve yourself, I know there's some people who'd really like to have that diet, but when you're a little kid and your brain is growing and your body's growing, that's not a good thing to have. So that's kind of why we moved primarily.
So how did you hear about or find Northwest Autism Center?
I found Northwest Autism Center through Dr. Gupta. We were referred from his primary care physician to Dr. Gupta, who is a developmental pediatrician and one of the very few in the area. And we had to wait 6 months to see her. But once we saw her, one of her very first recommendations was that we try ABA therapy, and she absolutely recommended Northwest Autism Center, hands down. And I can say it has totally changed our lives. With all confidence, they have been wonderful for my child because they brought him back to life, essentially, and me too, because in those situations you don't realize how bad it's getting until you are reminded of what it could be. And so coming here, my son started to eat again. He started to get himself dressed. He started to express interest in things. He started to want to communicate again. And it's been awesome. Like, it takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of uncomfortable and frustrating conversations, but they do such a beautiful and excellent job of listening to a parent's needs and assessing your child on an individual basis and deciding individually where they're struggling and where their strengths are and playing off of that. So we have been super blessed to get that started, and it has educated me on how my son functions and works and how I can help modify the world that he's in to make him more successful. Oh, thanks.
You're really good. So kind of talking about what you learned, some of the families have talked about that it's not just, about the child, but about the family. And can you talk about like how that's impacted you in family training and the group has done for you?
Yeah. I think one of the hardest aspects of struggling with autism and a potential diagnosis for autism in your family is the denial. I come from a background of educators. My parents are both public school teachers and believe in the public school system. And there are so many wonderful aspects about public education. But one of the areas that I think we're falling off in is that we forget that every kid is an individual. And just because it works for one kid doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. And so overcoming that stigma that as a parent, I was doing something wrong, or I was lacking in some way, shape, or form, or if I would just do this, or if I would just do that, or if I was just more disciplined, or if I could just relax, then my son wouldn't have any more issues, that it wouldn't be a struggle for him. And coming to the Northwest Autism Center was a real wake-up call for me as a parent to realize that it wasn't my fault, that it didn't matter if I cooked a million different things. My son had just made it up in his mind that he wasn't going to eat. It didn't matter if I covered every single window in the car. If it was too bright outside, he wasn't going to get in the car. And trying to relay, as I have learned, that information to family and friends is really difficult because they don't see it. They don't see the 4 hours in the middle of the night of screaming tantrums where there's nothing you can do and your son doesn't want to be touched or your child doesn't want to be touched, and they're in a corner and you're in the opposite corner and you're both crying because there's nothing you can do to make them feel better. They don't see the 12 days on a row where they won't eat a solid thing. all they want is liquids, and yet you're praying for just one bite of whatever it is they want to eat. If it's a gummy bear, fine, it's a gummy bear. Who cares? Just eat one bite of food. But when you have friends and family members, they don't see those things. They just see that they're crying or they're upset or that something's wrong. And as a parent, you're supposed to have the answer. And yet when you've tried absolutely everything that you know to try and everybody's recommended to try and it still doesn't work, you fail as a parent. So relaying that information that this isn't me and not my issues forced upon my child. This is who he is. And it is my job as a parent to step back from what I think the world should be for him and realize what it is for him and how I have to change my expectations so that he doesn't feel that pressure and he can be successful, whatever his success looks like. So relaying that to other people that, okay, so this is how we do this, has nothing to do with whether or not, you believe that's the right way to do things. It's everything for that child's level of success or what makes them empowered to do what it is that they need to do. So just keeping that in mind rather than all this is my social expectation or this is my, it worked for me, it worked for my grandparents, it's gonna work for this kid. That's not always the case. Their brain works differently, and that's what's so beautiful about them, is that they are different, that they are special in their own individual way. So,
Absolutely. Can you tell me what ABA stands for and a little bit about the treatment that he received?
I believe it's applied behavior analysis. Okay. So my son receives applied behavior analysis, and it used to be a very negative thing that, it's about punishment and negativity and, eradicating all these terrible things that your children do by whatever means necessary. That's not what it is anymore. I really wish people would re-examine it and get over the old stigma. We've come a long way in medicine in lots of different areas, and this is one of them. ABA is about decreasing those negative behaviors by reinforcing positive behaviors and by reinstilling in our children the things that we want them to know or what will make them more successful, and being open to modifying certain conditions for them so they can be more successful. So if in order to get your child to eat, they have to use a toothpick because that's how they're comfortable picking up every bite, then you use a toothpick because they're eating. And ultimately, you can graduate them to using a fork. It just takes some time and some practice and some persistence. Other examples are my child specifically liked to throw things. He liked the act of throwing things, and within 60 minutes, he would throw something 85 times. And as a parent, you're like, how in the world do they have the energy to sustain that and keep doing that? Well, that's how he was communicating, like, hey, I'm gonna throw this because it feels good and it's fun. Okay, well, we have to back up and show him what are other options rather than just throwing a toy, because then, of course, he's devastated when it's broken or it gets taken away. So taking that time to just, hey, what are your feelings? Let's use our words, and giving them vocabulary, giving them some skills, giving them some physical actions or things that they can say so that they can communicate with you is what ABA is about. Learning how to apply behaviors in a positive way so that they know how to act and work in the world around them rather than what makes sense in their own head and what's their natural reaction. So.
Excellent job. So we got that one for you. Everybody's been saying ABA, and trying to go through. So
Yeah.
That was wonderful. So what other things about the treatment here and things with Northwest Autism Center do you want other people to know about?
I want them to know that there's hope. Like, for me specifically and for my family, this opened a door to so many other opportunities. I had given up on the idea that I would ever be able to hold a job, again, because my son's needs were so great. I had given up on the fact that I would be able to have friends and family members interact with us and be around us. I had given up on lots of ideas of what I thought life could be, because I just didn't know. I just knew what I was dealing with in the present moment. And with Northwest Autism Center, they were so understanding and welcoming and accepting of where my child was at. And I didn't have to be ashamed of the fact that I literally had a 2-year-old and 2.5-year-old that couldn't eat food. And so I would give him chicken nuggets every single day if that's what he was going to eat, because, hey, he was eating something. So having that acceptance and that understanding and that lack of judgment was huge. I think the other thing too is, aside from all the wonderful services that your child gets, you get to meet other families and other kids that struggle with things that are similar to what your child is struggling with, or you can relate to. And quite often, especially when you come from a rural area like I was, there was nobody like my son. They said, oh, he looks like he's fine. And I'm like, well, since when do looks have anything to do with who we are as a person? On the inside, like, yeah, he looks fine. He's supposed to look fine. A person that suffers from cancer looks fine too until they don't. And so having that realization that there were people that could understand where he was at and where we were at as a family, and how to build us up and how to give us the tools that we needed to cope with the things that he was struggling with, was huge. I can't say enough how often I had people come to me and say, Tennyson is doing this today, and just being so excited because that was something that he wasn't able to do before. And just the rapid amount of progress he made in the weeks that we were here was phenomenal. Like, it literally went from felt like I was losing my child to they gave him back and then more. So, and then gave parts of me back too. Like, the joy of being a parent came back again, because it wasn't something that I was doing wrong. There literally were things that they could physically document he was struggling with, and it had nothing to do with what I was or was not doing. So that was huge. And then just watching the kids play together is amazing, because they get each other. They understand. There's no issues for kids when it comes to like what's going on. They just accept each other for the way that they are, and if somebody's having a bad day, they know to kind of give them their space, and if they're having a great day, they know it's okay to interact and play with toys together. So the fact that they're in one place and learn from each other it's a miraculous thing to see. You don't see it in a regular preschool setting. You see kids that interact, but they already kind of knew that when they're in this setting and they have people that help them and care, they unlock this whole other side of your child, which is amazing.
So you said giving you hope with him. What do you hope for him?
My hope is that Tennyson will take his individual personality and all the things that he has learned and become and use it to help other people. And he already does that, which makes me so incredibly proud of him. He recognizes that he's different. He knows that already. He's 4 years old, and he knows he's not the same as other kids. He knows that some things come much easier to him, and some things come much harder to him. But he is going to take all the things that he learns, and he's going to go forward, and he's going to be an amazing person. And I'm not going to be the person that tells him, no, he's not capable of doing that, because he is capable simply because he says that he wants to, and he's determined, sometimes to a point of fault almost, but he's determined enough that he can do whatever he wants to do. So my hope really is that as he learns and as he grows, that he takes his own uniqueness and applies that and helps other people. So,
Can you tell me a little bit about the staff at Northwest Autism Center?
the staff at Northwest Autism Center deserves to be paid in millions of dollars, because the things that they have to deal with, and the patience and the care and the concern that they show for absolutely every person that walks through the door, regardless of their economic status, is amazing. And that's incredibly hard to do. They value each person as an individual, and they really take a deeper look. My son absolutely loved some of the people that he worked with, to the point where he would literally tell them, I love you. And that wasn't something we necessarily heard all the time. So that was super special, because you knew he really meant it when he said, I love you, Miss Katie, or I love you, and would just run up and give him a hug. So that was huge. But the staff in and of themselves are so detail oriented. They are so good at taking themselves out of the situation and their own personal feelings as much as they possibly can, and realizing that they have this goal to accomplish and that these kids are really struggling, and so their ultimate goal is to help them. They put up with being slapped and punched and kicked and rolled on top of, to hugs and kisses and rubbing their face against your face and like wiping snotty noses against their leg and everything else that kind of a parent would put up with. At the same point in time, they keep data, they keep track, they work on the things that as a parent make you exhausted after a while, and yet they're relentless at it. They show up every single day and they work so hard, and they're essentially this beautiful tool that you can't find anywhere else. Like, it's a priceless thing that they do, and we're so incredibly grateful that they do it, because it takes special people to care that much.
Our next step, what are you going to
Leave
do
out
then?
$1 million raise.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Nonprofit, I'm gonna do a little bit more.
Yeah.
Anything, I'm trying to think here, anything you just want to tell other parents or general public or anything?
The thing I would like to tell the general public is stop judging. We learn as a child that you should never judge a book by its cover, and yet that's what they do. Everywhere you go, if your kid is screaming and crying, well, it must be that, you're neglecting that child, or it must be that they're just bad, or if you discipline them or spank them a little bit more, then they wouldn't act that way. We all know as individuals when we grow up that that's not necessarily the case. It doesn't matter where you come from. Your choices are your own choices, and you end up in the place that you're at based off of your own choices. And it's the same thing for little kids. They just don't have the ability to communicate that yet. They don't necessarily have the ability to tell you what's bothering them because they don't have the life experience. So stop judging them by what they look like or that instantaneous reaction, and dig a little bit deeper. Figure out their actual character, and no, candy doesn't solve everything. The thing that I would like parents to know more than anything else is that there is hope, that feeling of isolation or self-doubt and insecurity, that you're not sure what you're doing is the right thing, or that maybe this will just go away if you ignore it. Don't ignore it. Like, if it bothers you, if it's something that you feel like just isn't right, ask questions and keep asking questions until you get the answers, because it'll make your child's life and your life better when you find a plan and find a program that works for you. So accept that, embrace it, and don't worry about the social stigma that there's something wrong with your child. They're just individuals, and everybody is created differently, and that's why our world is so amazing. We have wonderful people because we're individuals, not because we're all the same. So embrace that. Have fun with that. Play up the fact that your child may only eat chicken nuggets, but hey, they're going to be a chicken nugget expert by the time they're done. So...
Oh my gosh. Okay, I am blown away. We might be bringing you back again for some
Okay.
other topics.
That'd be fun.
Particularly about the ABA and stuff too. I think that's it.
Okay.
I think that was just great.
Well, good.
You
Yay.
made me cry a couple of times too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you were fabulous and stuff too. And I loved the part